I had a Rocket 3R for an entire month and I royally messed up the review. Let me explain. I had the idea of trying to make the best possible review that I could on that bike. You know, riding the bike, getting experience with it, giving you guys my honest impressions of it, and trying to build some story around riding that bike. And what ended up happening is I did a lot of riding and a lot of filming, and the story I never built it out and it all just fell apart. Part of the reason is that I had too high of an expectation for this review. I had these ambitious ideas on how I wanted the video to look, but I didn't have the skills to edit the video to make it look like that, right? And I had these visual ideas like this one that I don't know where I was gonna go with this, but it looked really cool, but it didn't pan out. But anyway, about the bike. It was my friend's bike, but he gave me the bike right before spring happened, and it was during weeks of just rain. So I already had weird times to try to get rides in, but I spent most of my time on the Rocket riding to and from work, and also I got a few weekend rides in. But this was also during the time where I had the N109R completely torn apart for maintenance, like just shit was everywhere. And it was also right around the time I had just gotten the V-Rod muscle in the mail a few weeks earlier, so I was still coming off the high of wanting to ride that bike as well. Like I had a brand new bike just sitting here that I wanted to ride. And then the Indian Chief had just come out and I got the opportunity to demo that bike before anyone else really. And then later on I had to edit that, and then of course they reached out and said, hey Brandon, we want you to come to Arizona and test ride the Indian Chief. So I had all of that going on with a Rocket 3 sitting in my garage. All right, back to the Rocket. But first, if you're new here and you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing and hitting that thumbs up button if you enjoy this content. You know, help me keep some of these YouTube bills paid. But most of my time riding the Rocket, it came from riding to and from work and of course those weekend rides. So I really didn't get a chance to do like a long distance trip on it, but I guess you can say that's a first world problem. I had a Rocket 3 sitting in my garage, but still I wanted to do more with it given the time that I had. I learned a lot about the Rockets from simply having it in my garage, being able to ride it and have some type of ownership perspective of it, right? Because when you go on a demo day or a test ride, to me that's not enough time to really bond with the motorcycle. You ride it for a short period of time, you get off and that's it. You get sort of an impressions. Well, when I had the Rocket here, this was more like I was pretty much owning the bike, right? But it honestly scared me in a few ways, because not that it's hard to ride, but it is the biggest production engine that you can get in a motorcycle right now. And if you allow it, sport mode will rip your freaking jaws off. Like straight up, sport mode is nuts. But I messed up. Ideally, I would have done some type of impressions video, then like a walk around or a fast facts video, or like thoughts and opinions, or the way that it looked, how I expected it to ride. You know, then do a test ride and maybe have some type of long-term ownership review, even if it was just a month. But I had nothing. But actually, I did some of that at the Triumph Best of British tour. I actually flew out to Austin and got a chance to at least see the Rocket and at least sit on it. But I at least, I guess, got a chance to drink some nice craft beer, drink some food, and see some of the Triumph factory custom bikes that they had there. And then I got home and I reached out to Triumph directly because they're headquartered in Atlanta, and I was just like, hey yo, let me get one of those Rockets for like a short-term review. And essentially they just like ghosted me. So hey, it is what it is. But it's one thing to ride and own a motorcycle, but when you're in possession of somebody else's pride and joy, you have to take that with the utmost scrutiny. You have to be very serious about that. So I treated it with, what should you say, R-E-S-P-E-C-T? Yeah, respect. That's what I treated it with. But even if he told me to beat on it, I beat on it thoroughly, but safely and with respect the best way I could. And I made sure that I got all my fingerprints off of it and polished it thoroughly. But speaking of polish, I have a Patreon, and those over at Patreon, they help me make more polished videos. So if you want to check that out, I will leave a link below. But yeah, it helps keep some of these bills paid. Now with the Rocket 3, of course, I can compare it to my N109R and also my V-Rod Muscle. You know, they're all muscle bikes. They got big, fat, thick rear tires and, you know, beefcake. I don't know, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I can't spell, but you get the point. The Rocket 3 has more torque and more horsepower than both the N109R and the V-Rod Muscle. And it has twice the engine capacity than the V-Rod Muscle, and being lighter than the M109R. That's 1250 cc's versus 2500 cc's. Bigger stick wins. It's freaking insane. When you see a motorcycle, the first impression is everything. Sitting on a Rocket, you're gonna automatically feel like you're sitting on a freaking spaceship. That TFT dash gives it this futuristic vibe, and it straight up lets you know that this thing is freaking expensive. But that triple exhaust setup with the bronze plating and that single-sided swing arm, yo, it looks so freaking good. Everything on that bike feels like money, and I put a lot of fingerprints on it. And I ain't gonna lie to you. But my height is 5 feet 10 inches and I have a 28-inch inseam, and I'm 175 pounds of sexy. So I put all of my might in that seat. And the suspension, of course, is a monoshock, and it's set up for a weight of around 180 pounds. So again, people, they make bikes for me. I can't help this. I can't help this. The Rocket 3 is a stocky feeling bike. So those people with bigger builds, you wouldn't have a problem sitting on it. And of course, shorter riders, even though I'm able to flat foot the bike, you might have a slight problem with that because it does have a tall-ish sit to it. But either way, of course, if you want to ride one, just go sit on one at the dealership to find out. But I did have an enemy, mid controls. I'm not a big fan of mid controls. This bike, of course, being the R, it came with mid controls, and I got the bike for free, so I can't complain. But if I did have a choice, I would like the GT with the 4 controls. I mean, look guys, I got a freaking M109R and a freaking V-Ride here. That's simply what I'm used to. But either way, the mid controls, of course, allow you to corner more aggressively, and some people just like having mid controls. But for me, I'm not a fan. The reason I don't like mids is because on longer rides, my leg tends to cramp and I tend to get knee pain. So that's why I say, like, I think on longer rides, the GT would be better with the 4 controls, but again, that's just my personal preference. Here's some of my favorite and notable features on the Rocket 3. Again, it was cold. Heated grips. You get 3 options on that. You got low, medium, and then you got crispy. Of course, my hands were cold, so I picked crispy, and it worked beautifully, bruh. I gotta have heated grips now. Cruise control, self-explanatory. In 2021, going forward, every motorcycle should have cruise control. Every motorcycle should have cruise control. If you don't like cruise control, I don't even know a reason why you wouldn't want cruise control. I seriously don't even know a reason why you wouldn't want one. I just don't even know. Windscreen, it helps. It doesn't take too much away from the look, but it does take that pressure off of your chest and part of your head. Yeah, it works. His Rocket had the Garmin Zumo XT attached to it. It gives you navigation, media control. You can see text messages as they pop up if you need to pull over and make a phone call. Hey, yo, it's dope. Now, of course, the Rocket 3 has built-in, I think, media control, and you can get a GPS module, but essentially he told me that he heard that it wasn't that good, so that's why he got the Garmin. So the Rocket can do some of that stuff, but yeah, he just bought the Garmin to just take care of all that for him. Those tires, meaty. You need meat for a muscle bike. You cannot have a muscle bike without meat. It got all that. The exhaust on this Rocket wasn't stock. It came with the Competition Works exhaust. It gave it a nice, throaty, deep growl. For me, it wasn't too much. I don't like overly loud exhaust, but the best way I can describe it is it sounds like a German exhaust. You know, when you shift down, it has that Yeah, I love it. And I think the exhaust complements the lines of the bike. It gives it this sport bike look, because I personally look at it as like a big sport naked, because it's not a full fared cruiser. It really isn't. It's like the X Diablo. It challenges what a cruiser is, right? So that's why I consider it like a cruiser sport naked. Quick shifter. I have a story about that. So I didn't know that you actually have to enable the quick shifter in the settings of the bike. Yeah, so you get clutchless up and down on the bike. I didn't get a chance to try it out when I had the bike in my possession, but he brought it back at a separate time and I got a chance to try it out. And Triumph's gearboxes are just butter. It's so freaking butter. And on the Rocket 3, it was the exact same. It works really well. I love it. I actually might consider getting a quick shifter on the 109 and the V-Ride, depending on the audience reception. I might actually do that. But the handling is fantastic. Somehow Triumph shaved off 88 pounds compared to the previous Rocket, and trust me, it is freaking noticeable. But what's crazy is that the V-Rod again has a 1250cc motor, the Rocket has a 2500cc motor, and the 109R has an 1800cc motor. But the 109 weighs like 764 pounds wet, and the V-Rod weighs around 670 pounds wet. The Rocket 3 has twice the motor capacity as the V-Rod muscle, and it weighs like the same wet, 670 pounds. It's freaking crazy, man. Riding the Rocket is just like it sounds. Riding a freaking rocket. Hey, I genuinely was terrified to ride this bike. One, because it wasn't my motorcycle. I didn't want anything to happen to this bike. And two, it has 163 pound-feet of torque, and you feel every single bit of it. And I know some people are gonna say, well, you know, my sports bike has 200 horsepower. Yeah, and this bike has 165 horsepower, and it doesn't even weigh 700 pounds. But the key factor here is 163 pound-feet of torque. You feel every bit of that torque. And if you aren't used to torque, it will rip your freaking jaws off. And according to Triumph, it has a 0 to 60 time of 2.73 seconds. Bruh, 1, 2, you're at 60 miles an hour. That's freaking insane. I kept the bike in standard most of the time, and then as I got more comfortable with it, with more seat time, I eventually switched it over to sport mode. But being that, again, I got it in the winter, cold tires, and of course it was raining a lot, I put the bike back in rain mode for some time because I just did not want to deal with a twitchy throttle in sport mode. Because at that point you're riding on eggshells. I'm already riding on eggshells, now I'm riding on double eggshells. I didn't want to do it. I could talk all day about how terrifying this bike can be to ride, and also how easy it is to ride. Because again, you got power modes, you got corner and ABS, traction control, all these different safety features that help make the bike more docile. I can't say that it is a very docile bike to ride when you have the safety features on. But if you're like a new rider and you want to get this bike, the barrier to entry is a lot lower, because again, it used to be where you had to, well, you didn't have to, you could buy a smaller bike, learn on it, and then about 2 months down the road, now you want something bigger, right? And for bigger people, like the 109 just fits bigger people better, and the Rocket 3 would be the exact same. So now with power modes, again, corner ABS and different safety features, you can just turn the bike to the highest safety settings, and the bike will just be just fine. It wouldn't be scary to ride. And then as your skills progress, if you're a novice, you got your motorcycle safety course, you took that, and then you got your license. I always recommend doing it the right way the first time, then I have to break bad habits later. You can get the Rocket, set it to the highest safety standards or levels, and then as your skills progress, you can start to, you know, increase it to standard. And then you want to have some fun later on down the road, maybe a year, put it in sport mode. So do I recommend it for a beginner rider? Not necessarily, but for somebody that respects power, that respects the safety that is put into these bikes and will use those safety features, absolutely, I definitely would recommend it. But the whole reasoning behind this again is that power modes and safety features changes the entire conversation about this. The highlight of my time with the Rocket was taking it on a weekend ride, actually the weekend before I had to give it back. I took it on some curvy roads in this mountain adventure, and listen, so many people asked me about the Rocket. It's just a fascinating bike to see, and just people are just genuinely curious about it, but it is a show-stopping spaceship. And then I met a local rider that knew these roads very well, and he was a freaking knee-dragging, curve-slanging madman. That's the hardest I pushed Rocket the entire time I had it, and I literally had all of my faith in some rubber, pun intended. But like I said earlier, that Avon 240 in the rear with the 150 in the front, it makes cornering a breeze, and it corners better than what you'd expect it to. But hey, I'm Bicasso, and I like big booty motorcycles, so 240 plus, that's where we're going. But being that this wasn't my bike, I didn't push, but I did push. But I kept all the safety aids on, and it actually lets you step the rear end out a little bit. If you push it enough, it'll kick the rear end out and then, correct it. That's fun, but if you're not expecting it, it'll freak you out a little bit. But back to this polish. Before I gave the Rocket 3 back, I gave it a good detail, and that meant cleaning it, washing it, and getting all my nasty off of it. But I used some products from Meguiar's, not because those products are the best, that's what I had on hand, But you know, I had to get that thing sparkling, you dig? I didn't feel comfortable doing it with a machine polisher, but I did polish it by hand and it came out beautifully. Shined up the wheels, added a little grease to the sidewall, not the actual on the tire, but on the sidewall to give it a little shine. Man, listen, he was very happy to see it when he came to get it. And he took it on the ride to the Florida Keys that following weekend. He didn't have to do anything to it but put it on the trailer, take it home, and get his ride in. It was already shined up. So yeah, he was very appreciative of that. I was appreciative of the fact that he lent me his $24,000 motorcycle. So yeah, I could have, that was the least I could do. But yeah, that was my month with the Rocket 3R. It wasn't perfect from a YouTube perspective, but it was perfect from somebody lending me their bike and owning it for a little while and giving it back in the better condition than I got it. But you know, if you're a brand out there and you want to lend your boy a motorcycle, holla at me. Holla at me. Seriously though, the Rocket 3 is fantastic. But is it $24,000 worth of fantastic? That's the question you're gonna have to ask yourself, because these bikes don't cost near as much as that. But they don't do things as good as the Rocket. But is the Rocket, you know, as far as new prices go, is the Rocket worth $9,000 more? Again, that's gonna be something you're gonna have to decide. Now, if I didn't have these bikes and I had the money, I'd probably get a Rocket. But these bikes, they have their own pros and cons. They have character to them the same way the Rocket does. So I don't know. I still have yet to get my hands on an XD Oval for a long-term review. If you don't know, I have an absolute obsession with the XD Oval. One day I will get my hands on one for a long-term review. It's coming. But hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this one, and definitely subscribe if you haven't already, and maybe I will actually make this XD Oval happen. Or maybe it'll be a VMAX, who knows? But if you're subscribed, thanks for watching as always, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.